like the poor bastard that feels he will never eat again and devours all the food he can. Don Juan was definitely hitting me below the belt. I laughed, and that seemed to please him. He touched my back lightly. A hunter knows he will lure game into his traps over and over again, so he doesn't worry. To worry is to become accessible, unwittingly accessible. And once you worry, you cling to anything out of desperation. And once you cling, you are bound to get exhausted or to exhaust whatever you are clinging to. We hear this refrain of independence, not indifference, anything but indifference, but independence of all that would contain us, all that would impose itself on us or we on others. The fourth point of this morning, and this very much correlates, you will see, with the previous one, disrupting the routines of life. What are my routines? Castaneda asked. What are my routines? I asked. Everything you do is a routine. Aren't we all that way? Not all of us. I don't do things out of routine. When prompted, what prompted all this, Don Juan? What prompted all this, Don Juan? What did I do or what did I say that made you act the way you did? You were worrying about lunch. I did not say anything to you. How did you know that I was worrying about lunch? You worry about eating every day around noontime and around 6 in the evening and around 8 in the morning, he said with a malicious grin. You worry about eating at those times even if you are not hungry. All I had to do was show your routine spirit. All I had to do to show your routine spirit was to blow my whistle. What Don Juan had done was make the sound of a factory whistle. Don Juan was exceptionally good at imitating sounds, and he had made the sound of a factory whistle. And Castaneda had responded. Your spirit is trained to work with a signal. He stared at me with a question in his eyes. I could not defend myself. Now you're getting ready to make hunting into a routine, he went on. You've already set your pace in hunting. You talk at a certain time, eat at a certain time, and fall asleep at a certain time. Does that sound familiar? I had nothing to say. The way Don Juan had described my eating habits was the pattern I used for everything in my life. You know a great deal about hunting now, Don Juan continued. It is easy for you to realize that a good hunter knows one thing above all. He knows the routines of his prey. That's what makes him a good hunter. First, I taught you to make and set up your own traps. And then I taught you the routines of the game you were after. And then we tested the traps against their routine. Those parts are the outside forms of hunting. Those parts of the training are the outside forms of hunting. Now I have to teach you the final and by far the most difficult part. Perhaps years will pass before you can say that you understand that you're a hunter. Now let's pause and talk again about what it means, the metaphor of being a hunter. Yes, Don Juan was capable of sustaining himself in the deserts of northern Mexico and southern Arizona as a hunter. But that's not all he meant. As Castaneda found out later to his absolute shock, Don Juan was also a stockholder. Don Juan knew how to hunt in the world for what he needed to sustain himself and his apprentices. He had, as I said, many apprentices. And there were a lot of things that he did with those other apprentices that were very different from what he did with Castaneda. So Don Juan means the ability to live in the world in such a way that you have what you need without imposing yourself on the world, without taking more than you need. That's one of his key principles, not taking more than you need, but being able to sustain yourself with dignity and with precision, which he calls being immaculate. Now I have to teach you the final and by far the most difficult part. Perhaps years will pass before you can say that you understand that you are a hunter and that you're a hunter. Don Juan paused as if to give me time. To be a hunter is not just to trap game, he went on. A hunter that is worth his salt does not catch game because he sets his traps or because he knows the routines of his prey, but because he himself has no routines. This is his advantage. He is not at all like the animals he is after, fixed by heavy routines and predictable quirks. He is free, fluid, and unpredictable. Castaneda muses, I could not conceive of a life without routines. I wanted to be very honest with him and not just agree or disagree with him. I felt that what he had in mind was not possible to accomplish by me or by anyone. I don't care how you feel, he said. In order to become a hunter, you must disrupt the routines of your life. And the last point for this morning, becoming accessible to power. Now, this idea of power, this is not about occult powers. This is not about, it is the power to free yourself from the limitations, the upadis. It is the ability to stop the world so that it does not govern you, that you have the power to govern your relationship with the world as I said, in an immaculate fashion, with great integrity and dignity. This is Don Juan's, with two of his primary ideas behind this idea that the world is not as it seems to us, that when we conduct ourselves with integrity, with dignity, and with joy, life is transformed for us. And so we need to be accessible to power, becoming accessible to power. Don Juan said, now it is time for you to become accessible to power. And you're going to begin by tackling dreaming. The tone of voice he used when he said dreaming made me think that he was using the word in a very particular fashion. I've never told you about dreaming because until now I was only concerned with teaching you how to be a hunter. A hunter is not concerned with the manipulation of power. Therefore, his dreams are only dreams. They might be poignant, but they are not dreaming. A warrior, on the other hand, seeks power. And a warrior, on the other hand, seeks power. And one of the avenues to power is dreaming. You may say that the difference between a hunter and a warrior is that the warrior is on his way to power, while a hunter knows nothing or very little about it. The decision as to who can be a warrior and who can only be a hunter is not up to us. That decision is in the realm of the powers that guide men. That's why your playing with Mescalito was such an important omen. I haven't related this because it wasn't germane to what we're discussing this morning, these principles and observances, practices, restraints and observances. But at one time, Don Juan had given Castaneda peyote in a very controlled setting. And Don Juan did not refer to peyote as peyote, he referred to it as mescalito. And in this experience, Castaneda had an extraordinary, something extraordinary happened to him that Don Juan interpreted as the spirit of mescalito playing with Castaneda, and he saw this as a very good omen. That is why your playing with mescalito was such an important omen. Those forces guided you to me. They took you to by that he mean the forces that guide men, human beings. Those forces guided you to me. They took you to that bus depot. Do you remember? So I taught you how to be a hunter. And then the other perfect omen, Mescalito himself playing with you. See what I mean? His weird logic was overwhelming. His words created visions of myself succumbing to something awesome and unknown, something which I had not bargained for, and which I had not conceived existed even in my wildest fantasies. What do you propose I do? I asked. Become accessible to power. Tackle your dreams, he said. You call them dreams because you have no power. A warrior, being a man who seeks power, doesn't call them dreams. He calls them real. You mean he takes his dreams as being reality? He doesn't take anything as being anything else. He doesn't take anything as being anything else. What you call dreams are real for a warrior. You must understand that a warrior is not a fool. A warrior is an immaculate hunter who hunts power. He is not drunk or crazed, and he has neither the time nor the disposition to bluff or to lie to himself or to make a wrong move. The stakes are too high for that. The stakes are his trimmed, orderly life, which he has taken so long to tighten and perfect. By that he does not mean routine, remember. It's not this trimmed, orderly life. It's not a life of routine. It's a life of perfect decisions and perfect actions. He's not going to throw away that by making some stupid miscalculation, by taking something for being something else. Now, what we're talking about within the terms of Sanatana Dharma, of Hinduism, is the second world. What it is our active and ultimately our latent subconscious. The first world is the world of waking awareness. The second world is the world of dream, or our active subconscious, which is constantly alert and awake even when we're in the state of waking awareness, though most of us at most of the time are not aware of it. If you want to read something about this, read about the strategies that Einstein used to come up with the insights that he had. He used waking dreaming as a strategy. So this business of dreaming is real for a warrior because he can act deliberately. He can choose and reject. He can select from a variety of items, those which lead to power, and then he can manipulate them and use them, while in an ordinary dream, he cannot act deliberately. Do you mean then, Don Juan, that dreaming is real? Of course it is real. As real as what we are doing now. And if we go back and think about what Sri Ramakrishna said to Vivekananda the very first time he met him, Vivekananda asked, "Have you seen God?" And Sri Ramakrishna replied, "Yes, I see him. As a matter of fact, I see him as more real than I see you now." And he was talking about this second world of the subconscious, which Sri Ramakrishna had learned to master, the active and latent subconscious and the unconscious for that matter, through the practice of Tantra. There are real correlations between Tantra and what Don Juan teaches. Do you mean then, Don Juan, that dreaming is real? Of course it is real. As real as what we are doing now. If you want to compare things, I can say that it is perhaps more real. In dreaming, you have power. You can change things. You may find out countless concealed facts. You can control whatever you want. So that's the becoming accessible to power, means in the terms that we're more familiar with, learning to master the second world. Patanjali describes it very, very accurately. And as Swami Prabhavananda points out in his translation of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, is scientifically in the third chapter, the chapter on powers. When we learn to control our attention, so that this second world becomes indistinguishable from what we see or experience in sleep and what we experience in the waking state as the second world. Just to let you know where we're headed next week, there are 5 of these talks that are on Don Juan's teachings. Next week is on not doing and the gathering of power. So now it's that wonderful time when we get to talk with one another. So I'm going to ask Jyoti to unmute everyone.
And they can unmute themselves.
And you can unmute yourselves as well. And so let's have our conversation, and everyone will be able to hear you, and you'll be able to hear everyone else. Do you have any comments or questions?
Just 1 second. There's a Sham raised his hand. Let's see what happened. Let's see. Let me get into that in the chat.
I think that was we talked about that. Yeah, we were just. I think it's fine.
Yeah. That's good. There's nothing there.
Okay.
I could not hear it on my phone.
Oh,
I could hear it on laptop, but I could not hear your speech on phone. Why
well,
is that?
I just have no idea, Sham.
Why
I,
is that?
if anybody has any idea, please say so.
I'd have to see the phone.
And if you didn't at the beginning connect with audio,
Yes.
there's a, you push a connect with audio, then that could be the problem, Sham.
Okay.
There are so many ins and outs to these devices that I don't.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Brother,
Yes, hello. Who's that?
yeah, this is Stephen.
Oh, hello, Stephen.
Can you just double, sorry, I'm sorry, Stephen. Is everyone unmuted that wants to be unmuted? You can type me a message if you need me to unmute you and you cannot unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay. And you can send a chat if you're having a problem, because I've been kind of monitoring the chat.
Sorry, Stephen.
Yes, Stephen.
Yes, I didn't quite follow what you said about what does it mean to be accessible? Can you just briefly say that again?
To be accessible and inaccessible?
Yes.
Okay. The key idea is that you make the choice of accessibility and inaccessibility, and that it isn't hiding. It's simply in the very first part, the very first talk, we talked about erasing personal identity, erasing your history, personal history. This makes you inaccessible. And so then you share yourself only with those people that are going to, that you wish to be of service to, or that you feel are being generous with you, rather than being, as Don Juan said, just available to everyone in the middle of a busy street, which is very difficult for people in professions like yours, Stephen, because you have all these students that look to you for perhaps often more than they should. I know this from my late father-in-law, who was a professor of political and economic geography. And it was very difficult sometimes for him. So accessibility means you choose where and when to be accessible. You know, there's within the AA world, there's a term called codependency. And you must not be codependent. Codependency would be being too accessible.
Thank you, brother.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Please. Yes. I see a hand go up.
Swayam.
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 Yeah. I'm really enjoying this series of talks, looking at things from the different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
One question I have is, how do you reconcile this disrupting your routine from what we have been taught many times, that routine is important for having a disciplined life? You get up at the same time and you do this at the same time, you do your meditation at the same time, or we've always been taught the importance of routine. So I'm having a little trouble connecting it.
As I said, these instructions are not for everyone. These are for people who wish to follow the Don Juan way. Once again, the key is choice. Choice. As Don Juan pointed out to Castaneda, you eat even when you're not hungry. You may not be hungry at lunchtime. As a matter of fact, he had given him an exercise and they were working on it before Don Juan noticed that he had fallen into this reverie about it was lunchtime. He had completely lost track of time and place. Castaneda had. And that's the most successful people in the world are those who lose themselves in what they're doing rather than routinize themselves. This is, but that isn't, again, it's not for everyone. We have to do what is comfortable for us. And certainly we need to have, from the perspective of the lineage we're in and we're taught, we need to have regular spiritual practice on a routine basis. The way Don Juan saw it is you were constantly involved in spiritual practice. There was no moment when you were not involved in spiritual practice. It's a very demanding, most people are not going to live the life of Patanjali's yogis either. It requires disrupting virtually everything that we think of as normal life. Ultimately, it does. Thanks for the question. Good question. It is hard to reconcile.
I have a question that
Yes.
I have a question that is associated with Swayam's question. I'm wondering if also at different stages of the journey of the spiritual path, like when you're a householder, at different stages, if the routine becomes more important or it shifts beyond that.
Absolutely. This is why I say the idea is choice. But but the key is, if we're to be free, we are choosing rather than having it imposed on us. As Swayam said, we're trained to be, and we're told you must have a routine. This is that imposition. These are these upadhis. So when you pull back and you look at what is it that I want to cooperate with? What is it? This is that self-determination of a spiritual aspirant. So we need to have choice. So is that enough of an answer?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Thank you. Cindy has her hand raised.
Yes, dear Cindy.
Unmute, Cindy.
I just did. Now, I just wanted to say, I might have a question or comment in a minute, but if you're not actually speaking, if you could, all of us could just get in the habit of muting your audio, because most of the time it's not a problem, but sometimes, people in your house or noises, it comes through louder than you think. And just a second ago, I was hearing something from somebody's house and I could barely hear Brother Shankara. So just if you're talking, have your mic on, but as soon as you're done talking, if you mute yourself again, it would be really, I think, helpful.
Thank you, Cindy. Anybody else? Unmute yourself. Have a go at it.
Swayam again.
Swayam, yes.
Where is the resource, or what is the resource to read about what you said, what Einstein used?
I've read so many biographies in my life, dear. I cannot begin to tell you where I found that. But if I'm not mistaken, it was not in a biography of Einstein himself. It was in a biography of Einstein's wife, where she described his process of using, well, I'll just quickly describe it. There is a moment between waking and sleep where the mind does extraordinary things. And so Einstein would sit in an easy chair, and he put a pie pan on the floor to his left, and he would hold a heavy spoon in his left hand. And he would just sit there, and this was in the afternoons, and he would begin to doze, and he would go into that state sometimes. Otherwise, he'd go directly into sleep. His left hand would open, the spoon would hit the pie pan, it would wake him up. He'd pick up the spoon and go through this routine again. But there's much more to it than just that. There's this explanation of... I didn't hear you, dear.
That was somebody else.
Ah, okay. So I think it's in a biography of maybe it's an autobiography of Einstein's wife. I'm not certain. But if you go looking, you'll find it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Yes, Cindy.
To unmute myself. Also, I just wanted to say that there are some people who, well, there's quite a few people who we don't have video for. So if you want to say something or ask a question, if you look at the bar down at the, if you kind of mouse down or cursor down to the bottom of your screen, a bar pops up, and at the almost far right of the middle, there's reactions. If you click on that, you can usually get raise your hand, I think. Maybe I'm, anyway, or you can chat. Yeah, there you go. Stephen got that. Yeah, woohoo. So, so if you're not video, we're doing this right now to raise our hands, which makes it really easy for Brother Shankara because he can see that. But if you're not in video, just chat in or raise your hand or make some sort of thing. Anyway, that's all. But I did want to say about the topic this morning is in the discipline versus in the routines versus not having a routine. I always felt like Don Juan was, when he said routine, he didn't mean quite the same thing that we mean when we say routine. But I could be wrong about that.
He meant living your life according to that
Yes.
paradigm that had been pounded into you when you were a child.
Kind of mindlessly on autopilot.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
But I have, yeah. And I have noticed in my lifetime so far that real creative people and artists, and especially the more right-brained ones, right-brain dominant, they will get just totally lost in what they're doing, and they'll forget to eat, and they won't sleep, and everybody's saying, we eat something, and they're like, no, later. Yep. And that happens to me occasionally. It did Thursday. It hadn't in a while. It was a wonderful day, but you do, there's this thing about, we normal people who aren't following the path of Don Juan's and whatnot, we need a certain amount of routine and discipline, or we would burn up. The thing is, Carlos Castaneda had a teacher. He wasn't just jumping out on this own and like trying to abandon his routines and whatever, because it can be dangerous to do that if you don't have someone guiding you or watching what's going on.
And Castaneda found it extremely taxing to try and move away from the routines that had sustained him. He didn't think he was routinized until he began to look at it, and then he saw how routinized he really was. And so it's an interesting phenomenon how we are invisible to ourselves.
Sean raised his hand.
Yes, Sham. Did you have something, Sham? Can't hear you.
I'll unmute him.
Can't hear you?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes, you had a question or comment.
No, I don't have any comment today.
Okay, it says down here Sham Binderkar, so we thought you did. So sorry about that.
Okay, yeah, that's okay.
It's good you're with us though. Thank you.
You're with us on two screens, Sham, and
He
one of the
does that.
screens. Oh, he does.
Yeah, one is on phone and one is on tablet. So,
But there's one that's not muted, and sometimes sounds are coming through your house kind of loud.
okay,
But
let me
yeah,
see.
we were out of the room, I think, when we asked that when people
Yeah.
weren't actually speaking, if they would mute on their end, because otherwise sounds come through sometimes and it's hard to hear Brother Sean.
Yeah, I unmuted it, at the beginning. And later on, I now turn it on. But the phone, I don't know. But phone is kind of, I'm not able to see phone is not, I'm not able to get a good hold of that on phone. So I will have to check again.
The
Okay.
audio's not on his phone,
Right.
and I'm muting them if they're not muted.
Okay. Anyone else, please?
Steve has his hand up.
Steve, yes. Stephen.
Brother, you used the word precision when you were talking about the hunter. Would you just say what is meant by that?
It's a word used by Don Juan to, all right, I'll take it back into the Sanatana Dharma teachings for a moment. One of the things that Krishna teaches us in the Gita, and it's elsewhere, is don't react, act. And this is linked to this assuming responsibility. So much of, Cindy used the word autopilot earlier. So much of what we do until we begin to be so attentive, and it doesn't matter what system we use to be attentive. Don Juan's system emphasizes it perhaps more than any except Raja Yoga. But attentiveness to exactly what you're doing. There's a Zen koan, or Zen aphorism. It says, where are your hands? And that means, what are you doing? What are you doing at this exact moment? So that you're not doing it mindlessly, not doing it on autopilot, but doing it with consideration. And Don Juan uses the word precision, that you are being as thoughtful and as careful and as bringing all of your attention to it. And this is a way of gathering power. It's a way of not dissipating power. We dissipate power by acting mindlessly and letting our mind run away from us. When we are more thoughtful, more considered in our actions, and particularly when we do it from a place of calmness, we act in a way that Don Juan would characterize as precise.
You have a question over here now on the thing. It says it's from Veena Patil. Brother, did you mention about football earlier in the class, something you'd return to?
Okay. Swami Vivekananda in this aphorism, first bread, then football, then the Gita. We'll actually deal with this more next week. It's introduced with this idea of dreaming, which is not just something that you do, as we'll find in sleep, but it is the way Swami Vivekananda used the term. Football, of course, by that he meant soccer. And he meant to, as instructions to his monks, he was saying, take soccer out into the villages. And of course, that's much more true now than it was in Vivekananda's time. But take that game out into the villages. Why? It is a game that it is one of the most demanding games that human beings play. It's very intense. It requires great teamwork. It requires great, it's a metaphor for the game of life. So this gathering of power that we'll talk about next week, gathering of power, this is what you do to then free yourself from the rest of what's in what we think of as Maslow's pyramid. We no longer have to concern ourselves about all of the wants and needs of life. We're able to play the game of life successfully, cooperate with others in a team setting, do our individual part extremely well when that's what's called for us. If it's time for us to try to strike a goal, we'll do that. And with everything that we can bring to it. So this is Swami Vivekananda's. First, we learn to sustain ourselves, become a hunter. Then we learn to become a warrior, using the Don Juan metaphors here. And the warrior is a master of life. Life does not master the warrior. The warrior is a master of life. That doesn't mean that they're cruel or that they don't practice ahimsa. None of that. It simply means that life does not master them, that they are a master of the art of life. And life becomes much more enjoyable in this circumstance. And if you want to read about this in some detail, Swami Ranganathananda's book, Divine Grace, has such a wonderful exposition of this. That book, you could almost say, is a translation of Swamiji's aphorism. He never mentions it, but it's very parallel. First bread, then football, then the Gita. When your mind is free of all of these other concerns and considerations, then you have the power, then you have the attention to turn toward those things that Krishna is saying and make them part of your life, not just ideas you learn from a book. So that's yes. Was there a hand in the upper right-hand corner?
Swayam.
Swayam? Can't hear you, dear.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
When Don Juan says that who becomes a warrior and who becomes a hunter is not up to us, but to the powers that guide men, is he referring to Brahman?
He's referring to karma, as we'd understand it, karma. And ultimately, karma, as we know, we are also in some control of how karma works in our life. So, but he's instructing Castaneda in not being judgmental and in being compassionate there. Don't think everyone should be a warrior. Don't think, we have our own dharma as and swadharma, as Krishna points out in Gita. So I understand it as karma.
So was it Vivekananda who said first bread, then football, then your spiritual practices?
Well, first bread, then football, then the Gita.
In the Gita, okay.
But it may be some places translated as spiritual practices. Yes,
Niranjana had her.
Yes, Niranjana.
Yes, brother. So last 2 or 3 classes, you have been covering the practices of Brujo, and most of them, like losing self-importance or assuming responsibility, all these seem to be related to changing the attitude of a person towards whatever he does. So my question is, does this tradition, it's mostly related to tuning a person's attitude, or do they have something else?
Freedom. The goal is freedom. The goal is freedom from limitation, stopping the world. So how do we stop the world? Patanjali has an answer. Narada has an answer. You know, all of these paths lead to stopping the world. As it's said in the Mandukya Upanishad, the cessation of all phenomena. Phenomena exist in our minds, nowhere else. There is no world out there. Even the physicists will tell you this now. There's only vibration out there. We, through this incredible machine, translate that into the world that we experience. And so, and that we share in common. But there's no reason to let that be an end. It can just be the beginning for us, the beginning of freedom. And so as we move toward freedom, the reason for the changes in attitudes, the restraints and the observances are precisely the same as they are for in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra with the yamas and niyamas. The yamas and niyamas are not an end in themselves. They're simply to get you to the point where your life is tidy enough and cleaned up enough that your mind is not constantly distracted by things of the world. So the yamas are to get us to where we're not have an adversarial relationship to the world. All right, if we're going to replace that selfish attitude to the world, what do we replace it with? Then we have the observances of the niyamas. We replace it with this higher way of being. Well, this is exactly what Don Juan is leading his apprentices to. And it's more rough and tumble than if you read the books, and particularly when you read about some of the things that go on with some of Don Juan's other apprentices. I mean, for example, one of Don Juan's apprentices is a woman. He says she has become even more powerful than I. But she started out as this hugely fat, sloppy woman, self-indulgent in virtually every way. And Don Juan's nickname for her was 400 buttocks. And he used to tease her. You know, he would poke her like that. Now, he wouldn't do that if she wasn't wanting to be his apprentice. He wouldn't just do that to anyone, not at all. But he was remorseless with her. Well, she really cleaned up her act. And he said to Castaneda, he says, don't go near her. And he meant it. Don't go near her. She has become too awesome. I mean, the reason he said that to Castaneda, if you knew Castaneda's personality, Castaneda was given to fear, indulging in fear. And so if he encountered such a person as this woman had become, he could do something stupid out of fear. Don Juan was very clear with him. So the goal is freedom. The goal is freedom from limitation, as it is with all the spiritual paths. We are not limited beings. We only seem to be because we chose it. As spiritual beings, we chose duality. We chose duality. I am one, I shall become many. That's the Upanishadic explanation. The explanation in the Judeo-Christian tradition is the Garden of Eden story, where Adam and Eve eat from the tree of the fruit of good and evil. Before that, they had lived in harmonious and innocent, undifferentiated companionship with the divine. But then they chose. They chose. And so this is how we live. As long as we are content to go on with it. Ultimately, it's not according to Vivekananda. If you read the last few pages of Raja Yoga, he says it's not our destiny. Our destiny is different and higher. Limitation is just a condition we're in until we do what's necessary to undo that. Wonderful, wonderful question.
Brother, one more question.
Yes, dear.
You mentioned about the spirit of Mescalita, if I'm correct.
Mescalito. Mescalito.
Okay. So, who is that?
The active ingredient in the cactus bud, which is called peyote, is mescaline. Mescaline. And so the Native Americans don't refer to it as peyote. They refer to it as mescalito. I mean, if you're in conversation with them and you're talking about the so-called peyote cults and so on, they'll use the word, but that's not the word that they use among their road people, those people who actually do healings and awakenings and so on with people using that plant, and that they refer to it as mescalito. And it is a psychedelic substance akin to LSD, and it produces psychic experiences, not spiritual experiences. The reason for doing them, as you see if you read this book, Journey to Islam, the reason for having the experiences is to bust you out of your ironclad belief that system of thinking and being that was hammered into you as a child is all that there is. Emphatically, that's not the case. But as Neem Karoli Baba, Ramdas's guru, said when he was given some LSD and he experienced it for 6 hours, and then he rolled over on his side and onto his elbow and looked at Ramdas and said, "That's interesting, but that's not it." Of course, it would be meaningless to somebody like Neem Karoli Baba. It's just another interesting experience. That's what he was communicating. But it is a useful tool for some people. And we also hear about ayahuasca and other substances, these psychedelic plants. That's what Castaneda was a PhD candidate at UCLA. And that's why he went looking for what he called a key informant. He was going to do his doctoral dissertation on the uses of these psychedelic plants, medicinal plants and psychedelic plants, among the Native American peoples of the Southwest. That was his avowed purpose. Instead, he found his benefactor, his guru.
So I think what I'm hearing is that these psychedelic drugs like ayahuasca and LSD and peyote and mescaline, they might be good for some people, but for us as spiritual aspirants, they're just a waste of time. I think that's what I'm hearing.
it would just be a side road and certainly not something that would, as Swami Prabhavananda said in warning against them. He said, yes, you can have some interesting experiences, but then he said, inevitably they lead to a period of dryness, which is very hard to endure. And he knew wherever he spoke, he had accidentally taken some of this, I forget the name of it now in Sanskrit, the word for it, but he had accidentally taken some himself. So it wasn't just that he was saying this as some sort of notion. Siddhi, that's it. There was a gathering of sadhus in the Himalayas, very high level kind of people. And it used to be that in the Vedic times, and maybe it's still done, I don't know, but in any event, there was this mixture cooked up called siddhi. And the way it was done among this circle of sadhus that was sitting there, this little cup was passed from lip to lip, and they just took a sip. Well, it came around and whenever everybody was finished, the cup was passed to Swami Prabhavananda. He was just a brahmachari at the time and didn't know any better. He drank the whole thing, drank the rest of it. And apparently he took quite a trip. And Brahmananda sent him to his room and said, stay there until I come and get you. So, but Prabhupada said there was a period of dryness after his experience with that siddhi. So no, it's not good for spiritual aspirants that are doing as we're doing. We have our mantras, for God's sakes. I mean, the mantra is far more powerful than any substance.
Right. I guess the reason I ask, I've talked to people who've used ayahuasca, and they say they've had insight into past lives, and I can't remember any past lives. That's
well,
interesting.
What in the world is the good of getting insight into past lives? Don't we have enough trouble with this one?
Yes, we do. Absolutely. In fact, they even said today it's best to erase all personal history. So maybe that's.
Yeah, well, definitely do not be bothering about any past lives. I mean,
Just muddies the water
yeah,
that
exactly.
we're wading through right now.
Exactly. I mean, we don't need any past life experiences. It's just as Cindy pointed out, it just muddies the water. I mean, if you're just intrigued with that sort of thing and you have to do it, well, go ahead and do it and see what happens. We do things that are good and some things that are not so good for us. Is that about it?
Do you, I want to ask Shankara a question real quick. I'm going to move to. Turn you back on. Okay.
Is there anybody who would like to just tell us what in the world is going on with you in this very troubling time? This is a congregation of loving fellow spiritual aspirants. So if there's something that you would like to say about yourself or your situation, your family's situation, please, we'd be glad to hear it. We'd love to hear.
Kind of like coffee sharing after the talk, but you have to get your own coffee.
Jyoti, someone has sent a message over chat. You can read it.
Here's Salim Javid says, totally engrossed in your elucidation of the struggle for freedom from limitations. No questions, but deep reverence for your talk.
Oh, Jaima. Well, that's wonderful. There's 2 more in this series. It gets thicker It gets thicker as Castaneda learns more and encounters some other characters. There's a character coming up that in next week's talk. His name is Don Gennaro. He's a companion and fellow brujo of Don Juan. And what a character, what a character. Just is so charming and funny. So next week, Don Gennaro. All right, then we'll close it with yes, dear.
I also feel today's, as with every talk, today's talk was just wonderful. Also wanted to thank Jyoti and Cindy and whoever has been part of making the Zoom thing happen. It comes as close to being at the center as possible.
Well, it certainly is a joy from here to be able to be with you in this way when we can't otherwise.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for putting the Zoom together. This makes this accessible to me because it's quite a trip for me to get down here. So it's actually now easier for me to get in touch with you.
Well, good. Well, there'll be Tuesday night class, Wednesday night class, and we're also going to facilitate putting together what those people that have been meeting in Athens have expressed an interest in doing the Saturday class. So in our next week's newsletter, there'll be a link for you to join the Saturday class if you like as well. That's from 11 to noon 30. And the topic is Swami Prabhavananda's book, God, Realizing God. We're reading from and discussing that book, Realizing God by Swami Prabhavananda.
You've got thanks from me also from Kat and from Marla. Thank you so much.
Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. All right.
And from Stephen, thank you all. Your presence is a blessing. Om Shanti. From Girish, thanks.
All right. Well.
Laurie has her hand up. Yay. Hang on, let me unmute you, Laurie. I wanted to talk to Laurie. You're going to have to unmute yourself. I can't. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
Yes, dear.
Thank you so much, Shankara. I really appreciate all of this, and it's good seeing everyone. Although I can only see some of you.
Right.
And I don't know. I missed. Did you have announcements early or?
Well, the only announcement really was about the state of the center and the fact that the place is closed except for Arati. If you want to come to Arati, you're welcome to come to Arati. You're welcome to come to practice privately in meditation in the chapel, but that's all. We're not doing anything else as a group here.
Okay, I'd like to let people know that on a very wonderful website called Spirituality and Practice, Philip Goldberg is going to be starting an e-course called, let's see, Practical Wisdom from 6 Legendary Yogis. And it looks like he's going to start with Swamiji.
Very good.
And this is going to be happening starting Monday, April 6th till Friday, May 1st. And this includes, if people want to be interested, a practice circle, a 24/7 practice circle where anybody can make a comment from around the world, wherever you are. And the cost is like $59.99, so it's $60 basically. But their courses are really, really wonderful, and the practice circles are amazing.
I'm sure that's all true. Since they're charging for it, though, we won't put it in our newsletter.
Okay, but just so people know this,
right?
And just the website spiritualityandpractice.com is a very wonderful website with all kinds of wonderful courses and information and quotes and recommendations for movies. It's an amazing site.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share that with all of you.
Oh, for any of you who haven't seen the movie about Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, starring Tom Hanks. Cannot recommend it highly enough. It is a complete surprise. It is not what I expected it to be at all. And it is really a manifestation of who Fred Rogers was in a much different context than we're used to seeing him just as a TV personality.
Yeah, I was actually sad when he died. I thought he did a lot of good. What's the name of that movie? I'd like to watch it.
A beautiful day in the
Well, he used to
neighborhood.
sing at the beginning of the show, of course.
A
Yeah.
beautiful day in the neighborhood. Yeah. All right, we'll close with our normal beautiful chant, invoking peace. Let there be peace in outer space.
Let there be peace in outer space.
Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters.
Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters.
Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees.
Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees.
May the gods be peaceful.
May the gods be peaceful.
May the whole universe be pervaded by peace.
May the whole universe be pervaded by peace.
Let this infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being.
Let this infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being.
Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. Thanks for joining us this morning. Lovely. See you next time. The next Zoom we'll do is on Tuesday evening at 8 o'clock.
Now we all go to our kitchens.
Very good. Yes, time for the kitchen part.
I have to say, this is the first time we've had a cat at one of your talks. Tweet.
Hello there, Tweety.
That's one lucky cat.
No. Well, she heard you talking and she was like, oh, I got to get in on this.
Twee and I are friends, it's true.
It was so nice to see all of your
was
good
very
faces.
good.
Thank you for
Yes.
being here with us.
Yes, indeed.
Really good to connect.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you all.
Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you.
See you.